Welcome to the Tom Sense Show. We have got a packed hour right now. Democrats in Maryland just got caught trying to wipe out the last Republican in the state, and a judge told them no. The Treasury Department is throwing woke index funds directly into the trash where they belong. Plus, Justin Trudeau's team to the north thinks they can bully the American economy with retaliatory tariffs. We are taking your questions on the air throughout the broadcast. Drop your questions in the YouTube chat whenever something hits you. If it is a real question worth answering, I will address it right in the middle of the news. If it is pure noise, we leave it in the gutter. Let us get straight to the facts. A circuit court judge in Anne Arundel County, Maryland named Robert Thompson just handed down a massive ruling against the state Democratic Party machine. Governor Wes Moore went so far as to call a special legislative session for one single reason. Maryland Democrats wanted to rush a constitutional amendment onto the November ballot so they could redraw the map ahead of the 2028 elections. Why the mad rush? Because Maryland currently has exactly one Republican congressman, House Freedom Caucus Chairman Andy Harris, and one is apparently one too many for Annapolis. They wanted to bypass previous court rulings and gerrymander his district completely out of existence. But Judge Thompson blocked the measure from appearing on the ballot, ruling that the legislature cannot simply rewrite the rulebook when the existing rules stop them from wiping out their political opponents. State Republicans are celebrating this as a major victory for fair representation and constitutional limits, while Democratic leadership immediately announced they will appeal directly to the state Supreme Court. Democrats love to spend their Sunday mornings on national television, lecturing the country about protecting democracy. But the second an actual voter in Maryland pulls a lever for a conservative, they try to call a midnight special session to erase the entire district. If your version of saving democracy requires you to literally outlaw the opposition party from holding a single seat, you are not defending an election. You are running a monopoly. Andy Harris is still standing. The ballot is clear, and Annapolis will have to find another way to cheat. The Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service just put forward a brand new formal rule that lays down the law for federally authorized Trump accounts. Under this proposal, if you have one of these child-oriented investment accounts, you will not be allowed to park a single penny in environmental, social, and corporate governance funds. In other words, woke ESG funds are officially banned. Eligible investments will now be strictly limited to broad market index funds tracking domestic commercial equities. That means actual American businesses that produce goods, generate real revenue, and earn a profit. Trustees running these accounts will have exactly 30 days to purge every non-compliant ESG fund from their portfolios. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent came right out and defended the move, stating clearly that these accounts exist to build long-term wealth for American children, not to finance political activism for corporate boardrooms. Naturally, Democratic lawmakers and financial industry watchdogs are crying foul, claiming this hurts consumer choice and limits diversification. It is about time somebody stepped in. For years, Wall Street money managers have taken hard-earned retirement dollars and funneled them into climate virtue, signaling, and corporate diversity quotas that underperform the basic market. If professional fund managers want to burn their own personal cash on corporate sensitivity seminars, they are welcome to do it on their own dime. Trump accounts are built to make American kids rich when they grow up, not to subsidize green energy press releases. The public comment period is open through October 20th, 2026, and the money is staying right here in America. We turn now to a devastating natural disaster along the Himalayan border between Nepal and the Tibet region. At least 95 people have been confirmed dead, and hundreds more remain missing following a massive glacial ice and rock avalanche. The collapse triggered catastrophic flash floods that tore through the Lend Kola and Pot Koshi rivers. The sheer force of the water and debris demolished critical bridges, destroyed hydroelectric power installations, and wiped entire mountain villages off the map across several districts. The Tourism Board in Nepal reports that 384 tourists are currently unaccounted for. That includes 291 foreign nationals from the United States, India, the United Kingdom, and Malaysia who were traveling on pilgrimage routes to Mount Kailash. Military search and rescue teams from both Nepal and China have deployed heavy aircraft and excavators into the high-altitude terrain, but blocked mountain passes and destroyed infrastructure are severely slowing down emergency operations. Downstream, authorities across northern Indian states have issued emergency flood warnings as blocked riverbeds threaten to unleash additional sudden surges of water. This is an absolute tragedy for the local mountain communities and the families of the travelers abroad. Mountain rescue in that part of the world is brutal under normal circumstances, and with key roads and bridges washed out, emergency crews are racing against freezing temperatures and rising river levels to locate the hundreds of people who are still lost in the disaster zone. The Department of Justice under the Trump administration issued a very clear warning that local election officials will face federal arrest and funding cutoffs if they fail to follow federal election laws. In response, a national coalition of Democratic state attorneys general and voting rights groups is staging an emergency legal mobilization. Groups like the Washington Litigation Group are rapidly hiring former federal prosecutors and constitutional litigators to set up a round-the-clock defense network for local election administrators. The panic started because the Justice Department announced plans to deploy more than 1,000 federal monitors to polling locations nationwide, specifically to enforce prohibitions against non-citizen voting. Liberal advocacy groups are claiming that federal law enforcement presence is an attempt to intimidate municipal poll workers and suppress ballot access ahead of the upcoming midterm elections. The administration maintains that enforcing the law is the only way to guarantee ballot integrity. Think about what the left is actually arguing here. The federal government says it is illegal for foreign citizens to vote in American elections and that local officials have to follow the law. And the reaction from the Democratic legal machine is to hire an army of defense attorneys. If a poll worker is simply checking valid identification and verifying legal voter rolls, they do not need a high-priced defense attorney on speed dial. The only reason you need a legal war chest to protect administrators is if your entire strategy depends on ignoring the law when nobody is looking. Canadian Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne announced that Canada will impose retaliatory counter-tariffs ranging from 15% to 50% on 27.6 billion Canadian dollars, or 20 billion United States dollars, worth of American imports starting September 8th. This package hits roughly 700 American products and is designed to match newly implemented American duties rate for rate after bilateral trade talks broke down. Champagne was flanked by Industry Minister Melanie Joly and provincial leaders as he declared that Ottawa will defend Canadian industries and trade sovereignty. Border state lawmakers and trade associations are warning that these retaliatory measures will cause supply chain headaches and raise prices for consumers on both sides of the border as an emergency bilateral review approaches. Here is the reality check our northern neighbors need to hear. Canada relies on the United States for the overwhelming majority of its entire national economy. When Canadian officials stand at a podium and threaten dollar-for-dollar retaliation against the largest consumer market on planet Earth, they are playing a hand they do not have. American manufacturers and energy producers can find domestic alternatives or trade with partners who actually respect fair terms, but Canada cannot simply relocate its entire export market to another continent. If Ottawa wants to raise costs on 700 American goods, Canadian consumers are going to be the ones paying the markup at the cash register every single day. The White House set the terms of trade, and Canada will eventually have to come back to the table. A federal judge in New York formally threw out Ghislaine Maxwell's habeas corpus petition, completely shutting down her bid to overturn her 20-year federal prison sentence for child sex trafficking. Maxwell's legal team filed the petition, claiming they had discovered brand new evidence and alleged that false prosecution testimony during her 2021 trial created a miscarriage of justice that required her immediate release. The federal court rejected every single argument as demonstrably meritless, ruling that there was zero suppressed evidence and no constitutional violations whatsoever during her original criminal trial. Federal prosecutors celebrated the decision, making clear that Maxwell's conviction for running Jeffrey Epstein's international sex trafficking ring is backed by overwhelming victim testimony and hard evidence. Her lawyers say they are going to appeal this denial to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, but this door is firmly slammed shut. Maxwell ran an elite trafficking operation that ruined the lives of young girls for years, while believing her wealth and social status made her untouchable by the law. She thought she could hire a fleet of appellate lawyers to pick apart a rock-solid conviction, but the facts of what she and Jeffrey Epstein did are not going away. The victim sat on that witness stand, looked the court in the eye, and told the truth under oath. Ghislaine Maxwell earned every single day of that 20-year sentence, and she can spend the rest of it in a federal prison cell where she belongs. That is the news for this hour. Keep your heads up, stay sharp, and keep standing for America. I am Tom Sense, and this is The Tom Sense Show. Good night. Welcome to the Tom Sense Show. We are on the air right now with the news that matters, the truth they try to bury, and the straight facts you will not hear anywhere else. A quick reminder before we jump in, you can drop your questions into the chat at any point during this broadcast. If it is a real question worth answering, I will take it right in the middle of the news, so do not hold back. Tonight, President Trump scores a massive win for election integrity. A self-declared socialist takes a primary in deep red Oklahoma, and big tech gets hit with a multi-billion-dollar bill for poisoning our kids' minds. Let us get into it. The latest now on the fight to secure our elections, and it is a massive win for President Donald Trump. A federal judge on Wednesday formally lifted that nationwide block against Trump's executive order on mail-in ballots. This puts into action the 6-3 Supreme Court ruling from earlier this week, clearing the way for the Postal Service ahead of the November midterms. Under this order, the Postal Service will not deliver ballots in jurisdictions that refuse to check their voter rolls against federal citizenship records. Imagine that. The radical idea that only American citizens should vote in American elections is now the law of the land. Naturally, the Democrats are losing their minds. Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser rushed out with a coalition of liberal state attorneys general to file brand new lawsuits on Wednesday, claiming this violates postal rules. Voting rights groups are running around trying to get emergency orders. They want you to believe verifying citizenship is somehow an impossible burden. If you need a government identity card to board an airplane, buy cough medicine, or enter a federal building, you can certainly verify your citizenship before deciding the future of the republic. The left is fighting tooth and nail because they know clean voter rolls mean fair elections, and fair elections do not work out well for their agenda. For years, they told us requiring basic security was disenfranchisement. Now, the highest court in the nation has spoken, the lower court complied, and the federal government is finally doing what common sense demanded all along. Clean up the voter rolls, or your ballots stay in the bin. An update now on the escalating war in Eastern Europe, where things turned deadly overnight. A massive wave of Ukrainian long-range attack drones hit 16 separate strategic infrastructure sites across western Russia on Wednesday. Officials report that 3 people were killed and several others injured in the strikes. Direct hits caused massive fires at the Krasnodar oil refinery complex and a major commercial logistics center in the Moscow region. Emergency crews in Russia were left battling multi-acre blazes, and local governors are reporting heavy structural damage to their key industrial hubs. Kyiv defended the operation, saying they have to target the fuel and supply lines that feed the frontline Russian offensive. This marks one of Ukraine's deepest domestic strikes against Russian energy infrastructure this month. While both sides continue to trade devastating blows, this is another grim reminder of why this endless conflict needs to end. Every week, the strikes reach further inside Russian territory, the stakes get higher, and ordinary people end up in the crosshairs. This war has drained hundreds of billions of dollars, cost countless lives, and pushed the world closer to a wider catastrophe. President Trump has said from day one that the killing must stop and peace must be negotiated through strength. When strikes are hitting deep outside the battlefield and burning commercial hubs to the ground,